Hello and welcome. I'm Allison Kaywood, and I'm the Director of Public Engagement at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center in Edgewater, Maryland. I hope you've all been enjoying the Smithsonian National Education Summit sessions so far, and I'm delighted to provide a Smithsonian welcome to today's panelists for the session Empowering Student Voice, How Teachers Turn the Learning Over to Students. In my role at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, we think a lot about the role that young people have in being stewards and advocates for the environment and helping them understand how to find their voice and use that to do the things that they're passionate about and care about is such a central part of that process and of doing that. So I'm very excited for the teachers to be able to share the ways that they've been able to incorporate that kind of work into their classrooms. This session includes 3 state teachers of the year representing Utah, we're missing one, North Carolina and Colorado. These exemplary teachers will share how they have created learning spaces for students to grow into the best versions of themselves through class projects, student advocacy, and even day-to-day assignments. Our moderator for today's session will be 2021 Utah State Teacher of the Year, John Arthur. He is joined by 2022 North Carolina State Teacher of the Year, Eugenia Floyd, and 2022 Missouri State Teacher of the Year, James Young. Throughout the session, they will share their expertise and insights on how to center student voice in your classroom practice. Thank you all so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to John.
All right, thank you so much, Allison. And again, as Allison said, my name is John Arthur, and I'm the 2021 Utah Teacher of the Year. I want to start this conversation by loosely defining some important terms we're all going to be using today. You know, teachers, we love looking at the key vocabulary before we start the lesson. So when we are talking about empowering student voice and turning learning over to our students, what do we mean? Well, when you Google the term student voice, you find everything from students discovering their own voices by speaking up in class, to student councils having a say in the governance at their schools, to young people writing, creating digital content, or leading rallies and movements for the causes they believe in. Student voice can mean a lot of different things depending on where you're at and the age group you teach. And when we talk about turning the learning over to our students, the kids are already the ones doing the learning. I often remind my students, I already know this. What we're really talking about is giving our kids agency and ownership of their learning, letting their decisions and interests drive the work we do together in class. I want to put my students in the driver's seat. I'm still riding shotgun. I have that brake pedal I can tap if we start heading toward a cliff, but it's their hands on the wheel. The last thing I want to share here at the outset is when I was a kid, my father taught me Taekwondo because he knew his job as my father wasn't to defend me in life. His job was to teach me how to defend myself. So similarly, our students don't need us to empower them. They need us to teach them ultimately how to empower themselves. And today, I have the pleasure of joining with 2 of the top educators in our country, masters of the art of teaching students to discover their power and put it to good use. I'm going to ask Eugenia and James to introduce themselves in a moment, but first I want to acknowledge the fact that we were supposed to have a 3rd panelist with us, 2022 Wisconsin Teacher of the Year, Cabby Hong. Cabby, unfortunately, is undergoing emergency eye surgery today. But I wanted to share something I heard Cabby say once in an interview. He said, "My goal as the Teacher of the Year is to normalize humanity and excellence across identities." And really, that's the heart of what we're going to be doing today. So right now, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Eugenia to introduce herself first. Eugenia, do you mind going ahead and sharing who you are with the audience?
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, John, for that brief talk about what we're doing here today. I really appreciate it. My name is Eugenia Floyd, and I am a 4th grade English language arts teacher in this beautiful state of North Carolina. I'm the 2022 North Carolina Teacher of the Year, and I teach for the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools at Mary Scroggs Elementary School. I'm excited to be here today. Thank you.
All right, and James?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, John. I really love that illustration of your father teaching you Taekwondo. That's amazing. I'm so excited to be here. My name is James Young, and I am Missouri State Teacher of the Year for 2022. My specialty is music, and I've been at a Johnson Wabash 6th grade center teaching musical theater specifically, and it's been such a ride. So I'm so excited to be here with you all today.
Yes, sir. So really quickly, I just want to provide the framework for our conversation today so everybody understands. And one little side note at the start here, Eugenia, James, and I have been chopping it up in the green room ahead of this conversation. I got to tell you all right now, if you were looking to just listen to some professionals on a panel, just talk about what they do and why they do it in a relatively dry way. I know this is the Smithsonian, but I'm going to warn you right now. These educators right here, they are not kidding around. Eugenia has a quote that she's used where she talks about the fact that she's a force in the classroom.
Yes.
And I can attest to that. This lady is going to be bringing the heat today, and James as well. So just prepare yourselves for that. Now, the way that this conversation is going to work, it's going to basically play out in 3 parts. The first part, we're going to talk about our own origin stories, not just as teachers, but as champions for empowering student voice. There's always something in a teacher's background that explains how they ended up in the classroom. But for us, there's also things in our background that explain why we care so much about empowering our students, helping them find and access their power, and then use it in the classroom. So just as an example, I'll throw this out there. There are 2 parts to my origin story as a champion for student voice. 1st grade, my first memory from school. I don't really remember kindergarten, except I do remember I had this girlfriend and I kissed her on the playground. That's the only thing I remember from kindergarten. But then 1st grade, my first like legitimate school memory, I was waiting to have my picture taken for picture day, big group picture, and I told my teacher that I had to go to the restroom. I was that little kid who had to go pee. I'm just gonna say that. I said that on the Smithsonian panel. I had to go pee. And my teacher told me, no, you don't. Get back in line. And the thing that stung, and the reason why that memory has stayed with me, is not the fact that she didn't let me go to the bathroom. Is the fact that she told me that I didn't need to go to the bathroom. Like I didn't know what was happening with myself and my own body. She was telling me that my thoughts and the thing that I was expressing just wasn't true. And ultimately, I could show you the picture. I ultimately peed my pants, and they snapped the picture. I took it like a champ. I'm smiling in the photo. I got my bow tie. I'm looking good. But that's the first experience I remember having with a teacher, was getting shut down, having my voice disregarded and dismissed. But I also had an amazing teacher in 9th grade who taught me Model United Nations, Mrs. Kathy Anderson. I point to her all the time as the reason why I became a teacher. And before her, I was this shy Korean kid sitting in class, barely raising my hand. And she's the one who taught me how to stand up on a chair and rally people to my cause. And if it wasn't for her, I would not be here with you today. So those 2 stories explain why I prioritize student voice in my classroom. James, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you, man. Why do you prioritize student voice in your classroom?
Okay, yeah. Oh, John, I'm really sorry about that. That is rough. That's rough. And I could feel that, when you said you have the smile, but on the inside, tore up. So growing up, gosh, I was not a very popular kid for various reasons. We traveled a lot, and then I remember we finally settled in St. Louis. I'm from a big family of 8. I'm the oldest, and so my parents didn't have a lot, and they did the best they could with what they had. But that means I often went to school with shoes that weren't name brand, and bad haircuts and clothes that didn't fit because they were hand-me-downs. And so, I'd have kids tease me. On top of that, I'm mixed too. My mom is white and my dad is black. And so at that time, I'll give away my age. I was born in 76. So there's just a lot of things for kids to tease me about. And I just remember, but in 6th grade, I had a 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Wright, and she just had a way of making me feel that I was valuable, and that that I had something to offer. And it wasn't even just what she said, but I guess it was just, she told my parents, right? And so when I was getting teased in other places, she was really a champion for me. Going on, I had different educators. My high school counselor wouldn't let me drop out of the college preparatory certificate and insisted that I take it when I was ready to be done. And so then I also think about my band director in college, who was my first African-American male teacher, who I identify with. And I'm just like, wow, here he is. And so initially I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to be a musician that gave props to my teachers when I got my award. But I'm so glad I did, because I think it is the most amazing profession in the world. And so I guess that's why I'm here.
Yeah. And can you point to one of those teachers who really helped you realize that your voice was powerful and important?
You know what? Yes. I think it came later with my band director in college, Dr. Richardson. He basically, when I just was unsure of myself and what kind of teacher I would be, he was the one that just said, basically, you've got this. Just do these things. I'm teaching it to you. I see it in you. You've got it. And just with that, I knew, and he let me know, I knew that I could be a teacher. Now being here at the Smithsonian speaking, I never thought that far, but I would say it was between him and then also my grandmother, who was a retired music teacher.
No one like our own family to help us find our voices and feel important. I feel that. How about you, Eugenia?
Well, I actually have the privilege of teaching in the same school system I grew up in, and I am ecstatic to be just have been a part of such a warm and loving community as the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools was for me. And I would have to say, I started my educational career there in Head Start. I was in the Head Start program. I think I was in their very first class of Head Start. And I'll never forget just, knowing where I came from. One of the things that drives me, and I guess that story like you, John, that really resonated with me was, I don't know if anyone knows a lot about Chapel Hill, but Chapel Hill is, we're home of the Tar Heels, UNC Chapel Hill. We have UNC Hospital. We have a lot of great things, and it would be considered a very affluent area. You do have the $500,000 houses. You got the $1 million houses. They're there, and it's a community surrounded by lots of that. But I was also the kid that lived in the trailer park. So within that community of what someone from the outside may see as just so much wealth, there are communities that are still working and still just trying to survive and thrive. And, one of the things that stuck with me throughout that time and going to school every day, and sometimes being in a classroom and being the only Black child in the class or the only child of color in a class, what was true for me and why I really am passionate about student voice is sometimes when my teachers would not have conversations with me, they instead may have had assumptions about me. So there might have been an assumption about what I was capable of and what I could do and the talents that I have just because I was a kid that lived in a trailer park, right?
Right.
Or even an assumption about how much my mom loves me and cares for me, And so that is one of the reasons why I think I'm very passionate about my students having a voice in my classroom, because I truly remember what that was like and the expectations that people may or may not have had for me, just because of the community that I was from. And I mean, I just got on a school bus and went to the school that you told me to go to. And that should have been enough. When I got off that bus, it doesn't matter what neighborhood I come from. You should definitely be able to see me and know all the talents that I possess by having a conversation with me, having a conversation with my mom, and knowing that education is her number one priority. And there are things that don't fly at home that shouldn't fly at school, So I think that is where a lot of my drive in this work comes from, is making sure that we are not making assumptions about the what our kids are coming to us with, right? Just because I came off the bus from the trailer park didn't mean that there wasn't food in the refrigerator. There was food in the refrigerator, but a lot of that has to do with you making sure you listen and hear my voice.
Wow, man, I'll tell you, listening to both of you talk is kind of, it makes perfect sense how a couple of biracial boys and a young Black girl who experienced being others in their classrooms as children would become teachers who prioritize making sure that all kids feel powerful and like they have a voice. It makes perfect sense that this is the kind of work that we would commit ourselves to as we become teachers. A lot of teachers will say, especially teachers of color, I became a teacher despite this thing that happened in my past. And we could all point to something like that. But I feel like this is clearly a conversation that's about, I became a teacher because, and I teach my students to be powerful and to have voices because of the experiences we had as children and wanting better for our kids. So, with that on the table, I think that we should start laying out some of the tools that we use to empower our students' voices and turn over the learning to them and that agency and control. So, Eugenia, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you. There's a lot of teachers out there watching right now, and they are looking for strategies, tools, tips that they can use in their classrooms come the fall. So what are some of the things that you love doing with your kids? Some specific activities, projects that you have found really effective in getting kids to share their voices?
Absolutely. Well, I have to start off by saying one of the things that is true, my school was a pilot school for restorative practices, and I took the circles part of restorative practice and ran with it. And I think everyone in our school we all embraced it. And it has definitely provided that space for my students' authentic voices to come out. One of the things I love, and we are at the beginning of many school years, our school's about to roll in, and some people have already started. So if you're in a classroom today, you can do this tomorrow. That's a cool thing about a circle. But one of the things I really like to start my school year off by letting kids know right off the bat, like, this is not my classroom. This is our classroom. And honestly, I think it starts with us as educators first. Like, that's our mindset, right? Yes, I put my name on the door, but I also put my kids' name on the door too, because they belong in this space. The other part of that is, if that's the case, when we're thinking about our classrooms, we also need to remember that that's our community and that our kids have a say in what that community looks like. Restorative practice work always talks about how kids and anyone who's using restorative practices, they like things done with them, not to them. So when we're setting up the rules or the expectations and guidelines for our classroom, I think it's really important to always allow children to set that tone. What do they need at reading time? What do they need at math time? What does that time look like for them and the best learning environment, and what's going to be the best learning environment for them? So I think for me, I take charge. I allow kids to take, well, not me, but they take charge of what this classroom looks like on day one. Because again, it's not my classroom. I always tell people they got to spend 180 days with me. Like, like it's not me spending 180 days with them. They have to tolerate me. The cool thing about it, John, is once these guidelines and expectations for us as a class have been established, I no longer have to worry about, there's no issues of Miss Floyd holding kids accountable for certain things. Sure. They hold each other accountable. And what better way to allow them to run the classroom? I tell the kids sometimes, I'm only here for safety measures. Like, I'm here by law. I'm the facilitator of the learning. And so we do use restorative practice circles. I start my circle off with something as simple as, how are you doing today? What's going on? What's your favorite color? What is your favorite food? I usually don't ask questions about like, where did you go on vacation for winter break? Because every kid's not taking a vacation. If they're like me, they're sleeping somewhere. Like, that's fine too. And so I really try to make sure that we create this non-threatening environment where everyone has a voice. The other thing I love about a circle, and I know people are like, well, she's an elementary teacher, she can do circles. No, I was a high school student in a circle as well at a leadership camp. Like, we were in a circle just a few weeks ago, well, last week, James, at space camp. Circles work because you can see everyone. You can see how they're responding with their facial expressions to what you're saying. So not only am I teaching my students just ways of communicating, because communication is key in any relationship, I also feel like they're also gaining those social skills around each other, right? How their words have power and the effects their words have on their classmates as well. So I would say that the circles are a major part of my community building. But I will admit, I bring that into the learning as well. We have Padea seminars in a circle. I will bring some chart paper into a circle and we'll start doing the lesson right there because, and I just love it when my kids call a circle. They'll say, Miss Floyd, something happened on the playground and we need a circle. Like, whatever they need, like I'm just the facilitator. This is their classroom. This is their safe space. So those are just a few things that I do.
That's a beautiful thing. I'm visualizing this classroom environment that you built. Do you mind if I just ask you, when you said that their names are on the door, like literally their names are on the door, they're posted?
Yeah. Why not?
That wasn't a metaphor, right? You're literally putting things on the wall. Yeah.
Well, my name's on the door, so there should be too.
I feel you. I'll just throw this out there, something to think about. In my classroom, I have glass walls, so you can write on them with Sharpie, not like all four. We're not in like a fishbowl, but our main wall to the hallway is glass. But even before I had glass, I would have students just do this on sticky notes. I have my students blanket our walls with positive affirmations, things that they say to each other, Sparkle, all my students have nicknames too. So, if I refer to a student, it sounds ridiculous. That's why. But like, Sparkle is an incredible friend. She's always kind and she helps me out during math. Boom, on the wall. So that anybody coming by can see, again, bringing it back to voices, that they don't just use their voice to tell the world what they believe. They also use their voices to acknowledge the excellence in others, and circles are a beautiful way to help kids really see each other and appreciate each other. James, what do you do in your classroom, man?
That's all really good. I really appreciate that. And I really like what you said, Eugenia, about, you're just here for safety measures. I really like that. And so I'm a fine arts teacher, and that can be tough. My professor, Dr. Richardson, told me, that first year, 2 or 3 is about you, and then it becomes about your students. And I've really lived that. I came in and got the band position job that I wanted, and it was really about my success in the beginning. And so the question is, who is it really about? That's what I had to learn, that it's about them. It's about their success. And so, but that takes a shift in thinking. And so I've shifted over the years, that's gotten better for me. But another shift came during this COVID year where I had to, so I co-teach musical theater. And so in the middle of this new program, musical theater, combined teaching, it was awesome. We were putting on The Lion King. And so we did one show of it, but then all of a sudden COVID hit and we had to go virtual. And that just, wow, it just kind of knocked it out of the box. But we got to the next year, and so we had to go online, but it did something different though. One thing we noticed, we're a semester-long class and students don't really get to choose us. They kind of just come to us. And so one thing they say is, Mr. Young, I'm not going to sing, or I'm not going to dance, or I'm not going to get up on that stage and act. And that can be tough, and that can be discouraging.
These are 11 and 12-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And so I'm not doing it. But what I've learned to do, first of all, is not to take that to heart too hard. Because if you get discouraged by that and you let it's kind of like the hoodie. If a kid comes in the class with a hoodie and has his head down or her head down, that doesn't mean that they don't want to participate necessarily. you got to give them some grace. You got to give them some time. So I think a lot of it is key is just grace. I know that's what you're saying now, but I know something different. And I've seen it time and time again where students at the beginning of the year, they're saying, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing this. And by the end, they're just excited and they do the most amazing things. So one of the things we had to do, we had to shift from this show idea to individual projects or even projects they could work on in groups. So we would make everybody try dancing, try singing, try acting, but ultimately they get to key in and focus on the thing that they felt most successful at, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that made it different. So I'm like, okay, you're going to try it, but your focus area, when this is all said and done, we're going to hit all the content, but we realize this is not for everybody. But we're convinced that by the end of this, you're going to shine. And so I think that's really key, giving them a variety of things to experience. You got to teach your content, but also reassuring them you're going to shine at something. I already know it. And when you put that out there, I think that sets them up for success.
Man, I couldn't agree more. And that kid coming in with a hoodie, putting their head down and throwing it up, that's a kid with voice. That kid's saying something. And those kids that you're describing saying, I'm not doing that, you can't make me. I had a student this last year who said something similar for, just one activity, one specific thing. No, Captain, I'm not doing that. My kids call me Captain.
That's awesome.
Captain, I'm not doing that. I looked at him and he looked at me like he was waiting for me to get upset or say something to push him to actually do it. I just looked at that kid and I said, look how powerful you are. Gave him a fist bump and walked away. That kid was just putting his foot down. And that's something that we should not be discouraging as teachers. Building that agency and that voice in them is the point. And I went to him later though. I said, hey man, if you're not doing it because you think you can't, then I disagree.
Go ahead.
You can. I want you to try. But if you're not doing it because it strikes you just wrong in your heart and your soul, I feel you.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because when we talk about student voice, our kids are saying stuff all the time. It's just, are we receiving it? Are we listening?
Yes.
Yeah.
And giving them space. Yeah. And going back to Eugenia, something you said. So I'm from the neighborhood of Kinloch, and we got bused to the north side of the district as part of the desegregation program. And so I had some of that same thing. Well, they're from Kinloch, and this expectation is this or this thing that, well, their parents don't care about education. That's not, you can't make those assumptions. That's voice too, and so that's so important. I think that's so important. Don't count any student out. Don't count any of them out, because they have it in them. They can do it.
Yeah. And have you had a kid turn on you in the circle and say, no,
I'm not doing it.
I mean, honestly, the circle I haven't had anyone really have a really big disagreement about doing the circle. Now, do they disagree with each other in the circle? Absolutely. The circle has been a heated space. However, we know that anger is a real emotion. Being upset and having disagreements are real things. And one of the things I pride myself on is I'm not preparing my students just for fifth grade. Right. I need them to be prepared for life outside of my classroom. So when you would disagree with someone, you don't necessarily have to raise your voice. You can respectfully disagree, and giving them some of those strategies to be able to use outside of the school sphere. And the other thing, I just really love what you just said, John, because it reminded me how you said that student stood his ground. It reminded me of the fact that how dare we ask students to do stuff that we're not willing to do? Because at the end of the day, there's no way. Y'all cannot make me read a book that got snakes all in it. I'm not doing it. I'm petrified. I'm petrified beyond belief. I cannot even watch them on television. So of course I'm not engaging in that. And so I think it's really important that when we ask children to be open to us, and when we ask children to be vulnerable with us, we too have to do that with them. So the kids I want to also stress, the kids are not just having a circle and I'm outside of it. I'm also in the circle with them, because me and anybody else who's visiting my classroom, you're going to be in the circle too, because at that moment you're a part of our community. And so I'm a true believer, we should never, don't ask children to do things that you as a grown-up are not willing to do.
I just want to throw this out there as a strategy. You're talking about teaching kids strategies for communicating and working together within that circle. I use sentence stems. I call them my sentence stems for awesome conversations, but any sentence stems will do. I tape them to their desks and I have them on the wall for constant reference, but they're sentence stems for respectfully agreeing, respectfully disagreeing. Things as simple as, I agree with James because blank, or I hear what Eugenia is saying, however, blank. And when we watch the news, we see people who clearly did not grow up in circles, people who did not learn sentence stems as children to have effective, productive conversations. And so when we're talking about student voice, we're not just talking about assignments in the classroom, although there are those, writing, content creation, videos, whatever. It's about developing a voice that is informed and that knows how to communicate in respectful, productive, positive ways. And you could not have risen to the heights of greatness that you have as 2022 State Teachers of the Year if you had not learned this at some point. I don't know if it came from your grandma, James, or whoever else, but clearly you were taught this and now you're teaching kids. But to move into the final part of our conversation, once you teach kids how to speak in an effective and respectful way, once you've developed in them a sense of power, agency, and the fact that they live in a community, their voices then need to be amplified because our students are brilliant and the things that they have to say need to be heard. I once walked into a classroom when I was a methods student, pre-service teacher, and I saw a kid standing in the corner just talking to himself. I went up to the teacher. I said, "What's that kid doing?" And she said, he's practicing a speech. I said, "Oh, that's cool. What's he going to do after he does it in the corner?" "Oh, he's going to say the speech to the class." I said, "Oh, that's cool. He's learning to listen to himself before he does the thing." But then after he gave his speech to the class, I was wondering to myself, then what? Students turn in assignments in class, we hand them back, they often end up in the garbage. Why is there not this additional piece where their voices echo out? And especially now with the technology we have, their voices could go anywhere. Social media, Zoom, everything else. We've got these tools for, as teachers, amplifying our students' voices, but it can be scary for teachers. So I just want to put it to you. What do you think we can and should be doing to amplify our students' voices after we've empowered them? How do we put it out there for a broader audience? Eugenia, you want to take this one first?
Sure. I definitely will say, like, as an educator, anybody who is an educator, I got a growth mindset. I always have room to grow, especially in this area, right? How can I make sure that my fourth graders' voices are being amplified? One of the things that I will say that a part of the State Board of Education, I'm an advisor to the State Board of Education of North Carolina right now. And one of the things our chairman of the board regularly says is our children are watching us. And they really are, right? And so I've also talked with several teachers, our North Carolina Beginning Teachers of the Year. And one of the things that we've all talked about is, when our students are giving voice, well, what's the action afterwards, right? We say so often, like, I hear you, I see you. They're wanting you to do something with that.
Exactly.
And so that's one of those other hurdles I know that I personally, as an educator, want to make sure that I'm helpful in amplifying it. I know that I can speak on some of my colleagues. I know our 2022 North Carolina Beginning Teacher of the Year has had some of his students speak at board meetings and use their voice to share the needs and desires that they have for their school and their community. Like, that's a phenomenal thing. And it made me think, I was like, how can I get my fourth graders to make sure that they share what they've learned in their classroom? I will say that one of the things that has happened kind of naturally within our classroom is I do a unit on social issues that exist in the world. And I start really basic with my students. And I'm the facilitator.
Yep.
They get to share out all the things that they've seen in the world. And y'all, they've seen some things. And so my example to them is bullying. And then they share out things that they've noticed, and we identify them in books. We even talk about specifically where we would be in these spaces or where we are in this space. So my children have this opportunity to talk about the social groups that they belong to and like really doing some kind of internal work. And I talked to them about this because it's so funny. I spoke about this same lesson with another teacher, and she was like, I need to do that too. What social groups do I belong to? So when I think about the amplification of voices, it was wonderful to get emails from some of my parents that say, Miss Floyd, I'm so glad you're doing this. Like we had a whole family discussion about this, because I think about how not only did that conversation in my classroom allow children to have that identity check for themselves of how they show up in the world, but it also allowed them to have a family discussion about ways to resolve those social issues, ways that they can step in and break away from those things. So I was really grateful to see that not only are my students having the discussion with me, but they're spreading that good word, right? They're spreading that good news to all the people that they're encountering. And funny is, John, it's funny when they come from recess and say, Miss Ford, I saw an injustice, and we have to break down what that means, and how that injustice played out for them. So that is definitely one of the ways that I can see our smallest and youngest children. I tell children all the time, I watched this movie when I was in high school called The Children's March. And it is all about how children were the people out there protesting and doing the dancing in the street during the marches to say that this is not okay. And I think it's a very powerful way for us to remember that they have voice and agency. And it's up to us as the adults, when we say we want to hear from them, that also means we need to do something with that information.
I love that you brought in that documentary, because I teach sixth grade. We teach current events. I show my students that documentary every year. For those of you who haven't watched it, it's all about children in Alabama when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went down there and said, we need to fill up these jails. The adults said no, and the children said, we'll do it. And they got out there and they affected the change that they were looking for. And James, I want to turn it over to you, man. What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, that is so powerful. It is so powerful. I really appreciate that. And it is true. Someone's always watching. And so I would say that I feel like I have a little bit of an edge as an arts teacher. It is about expression. But I guess I'm just going back to the original thing. Who is the success really about? And so kind of piggybacking off of the last answer, once we had students kind of choose their lane within our content, then we gave them a chance. And this is during that COVID year, we put it on a Google site. And so, but we didn't put everything. Fortunately, we could put what they felt was best. So they had a choice in what got presented. And oftentimes that choice is the voice. And so you take that kid who was reluctant to dance. Well, that's okay. Your dance won't be on there, but your voice will, or your acting will. And so I think just letting them know it's okay not to fit every category. It's okay to shine where you shine. And we still had the grading for what was necessary, but we put out there the product that came out was their best. And if you think about just the modern workforce in the global economy, that's what we do. We find ourselves in areas where we can shine and be strong and let someone else partner with us to do the other things. And so I think that's really the key to it all, shifting the success to them and allowing them to have the choice in what that's going to be in the grander picture of our success as a whole.
Yeah, it's always a good reminder that we as teachers have the power to either help a kid shine brighter or we could dim their light. And when we center their voices, we give ourselves the best chance possible of helping them shine. When it comes to amplifying their voices, for any teacher who's out there thinking about like, how do I do this? What does that look like? I think you two have provided some amazing examples, and it doesn't have to be as big as musical theater or anything else. You know, kids don't have to show up in board meetings like you were describing, Eugenia, but they can write to their legislators. They can write letters to the editor. And that's in our content standards. They have to write anyways. Why not write things that we can then share? I'll share really quickly. I had a student who once wrote a piece on sexism. She wrote this amazing essay, and she brought serious heat to it, man. It was shining, but it was hot too. And I took all of my students' pieces. I just put them out in the hallway where other people could walk by and see it, and other students, other teachers. That was a small work in amplification. And one day I was hanging out in the hallway talking to my partner, and a first grade teacher came by, Miss Melissa. And I watched her lean in close, and she was looking at that piece on sexism about how women should be paid the same as men and so on and so forth. And she leaned in, she read it, she leaned back, said, "Hell yeah," and then kept on walking. It was fifth grade at the time. This fifth grader moved her, and just by taking her work and putting it on my wall rather than in a folder, I had amplified her message. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be scary or intimidating, but it can be. If you want to put them on YouTube, and my students will never forgive me, they have a YouTube channel, 9th Evermore, the number 9 TH Evermore. Go check it, subscribe and like and all that stuff they say. Here in the final minutes that we have together, guys, I just want to give you a chance to share out anything else that you want to say, anything that you're living with, or anything that has come up for you in this conversation. James, you want to go for it, brother?
Sure. I guess just want to go back to the fact that you really don't know who you're teaching, right? You really don't know what they're destined for. And we can make a lot of assumptions because of a lot of different things, but you could have the next president in your classroom.
Mm-hmm.
You could have the next scientist who is part of that Mars trip that's heading out here soon, you know, and treat them accordingly. I love what you said, John, in the beginning, how that teacher said, "No, you don't." Like, we can't say that to our students. No, you can't. It's so important that we realize there's greatness there and we really don't know. And so treat everyone as if they are royalty. Treat everyone as if they are shooting for the stars, and we'll do great.
Gina?
Well, I guess I'll leave everyone with something that I have always said. I've been saying since this Teacher of the Year process has been happening. You know, at the end, you know, James, you alluded to this as well. I tell people all the time, I don't work for anyone else but children. And if you're in the business of working for children, then that means you see them. And part of seeing them means you hear them. You first got to listen before you can actually see who they are as people and what they can accomplish. So I think it's really important that we remember to always remember that we're in this business for children. I think that there have been and can be many distractions to get us away from it, but remember who we are in the business to serve. Our number one priority are the kids, and making sure that their voices are heard, making sure that they're seen, making sure that they're empowered. I don't want anything left on the table for my babies. I want them to have all. They deserve every ounce of it. And that's partly of most of the time that means I got to get out of the way. I have to get out the way so that they can do all the great things that they are capable of, so they can have the great thoughts that they think they have, all the things. Just let them be them and watch their greatness happen. That's what I just want everyone to remember. Just let them do them and watch it happen.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes great teaching just getting out of the way. Well, on that note, mic drop, Eugenia. I'm going to turn it back over to our host at the Smithsonian. I want to thank you, James and Eugenia, for joining me in this conversation. It's been amazing.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.